Zoe Johnson's cell phone rang while she was mopping the floor in the opulent lobby of the Grand Horizon Hotel in New York City. Normally, she never answered during work hours. Rule number 1 from her manager, Ms. Richards, especially for housekeepers. But she recognized the number. It was the university. After 6 failed attempts to secure a scholarship for a master's in linguistics, this call could change everything. "One moment," she whispered to herself, ducking behind an ornate marble column. In those few seconds, her life transformed. "Zoe Johnson," she answered cautiously, hoping the guests passing through the lobby wouldn't notice. The voice on the other end spoke in perfect Dutch. It was Professor Van Houten from Amsterdam University. Zoe responded fluently in Dutch, her pronunciation flawless, as they discussed her application for an international program. She explained her concern that her motivation letter hadn't arrived on time. Then, noticing a sudden hush around her, she looked up to see Richard Coleman, a billionaire and owner of the Horizon Hotels chain, standing a few feet away, watching her with undisguised astonishment. Beside him was Miss Richards, her eyes wide with fury. Zoe swallowed hard. "I have to go. I'll call later," she said hurriedly in Dutch, hanging up. "Johnson, my office now." Miss Richards' voice cut through the air. The walk to the small administrative office in the basement felt endless. Zoe sensed her colleagues' stares, some pitying, others barely hiding their satisfaction. At 28, she was the only black woman in the housekeeping department with a college degree, a fact Ms. Richards conveniently forgot. "You know the rules, Johnson. No phones during work hours, especially in public areas," Richards snapped as soon as Zoe closed the door. "Was that French? Dutch?" Zoe instinctively corrected. "Dutch," but regretted it instantly. "I don't care if it was Martian. What concerns me is that Mr. Coleman, the owner of this hotel, saw a housekeeper ignoring her duties and chatting on the phone in the lobby." The unfairness burned like acid. White receptionists took personal calls regularly without consequence, but Zoe knew how this worked. It was the same as always. "I'm assigning you to the convention center restrooms for the next 3 months. Maybe there you can practice as many languages as you want without embarrassing the hotel." Zoe's stomach sank. Cleaning after corporate events at the convention center meant double shifts with no overtime, a classic Richards punishment for those who crossed the line. Go and be grateful you're not fired. That night was one of the longest. In her small apartment, shared with 2 nurse roommates, Zoe cried silently, staring at her linguistics degree and international certificates framed on the peeling wall. 6 years of cleaning hotel rooms, saving for a master's, sending resumes that got no responses after in-person interviews. The next morning, she arrived early, determined to show professionalism despite the injustice. That's when the front desk phone rang. "Zoe Johnson," called Jennifer, the senior receptionist. "HR wants you now." HR was on the top floor, near the executive office's uncharted territory for housekeeping staff. In the elevator, she felt invisible as always. Executives discussed million-dollar mergers, but didn't even glance at her. "Johnson," the HR director called as she entered. "Please, sit." Zoe sat stiffly, bracing for the worst, likely a termination. "Mr. Coleman requested a meeting with you." His office was larger than her entire apartment. Richard Coleman, 47, was renowned in the business world for turning bankrupt hotels into luxury properties. Now he looked directly at her. Dutch, French, Italian, and Mandarin, correct? He asked, glancing at an open folder on his desk. Zoe blinked, confused. How did you get my resume? I requested it from HR as soon as I heard you yesterday. Graduated with honors in linguistics from Georgetown University, fluent in 6 languages, 2 of them Asian, and cleaning my hotel for 6 years. Zoe didn't know this moment wasn't a coincidence. No one at the hotel suspected that the Dutch phone call hid a larger story, an improbable connection that would not only change Zoe's life, but expose a system of discrimination that had buried exceptional talent behind brooms and cleaning supplies for years. If this story of workplace bias angers you, subscribe to learn how a simple phone call in a foreign language sparked changes even the most powerful billionaire couldn't predict. Silence filled the office for a moment. Zoe froze, processing what she'd heard. Richard Coleman knew who she was, not just as the invisible woman in a housekeeper's uniform, ignored in the halls. 6 years, Coleman repeated, closing the folder and crossing his arms. May I ask why a Georgetown-educated linguist is cleaning my bathrooms instead of handling international translations? Zoe took a deep breath. I sent 47 resumes to this hotel's international relations department. All were ignored. I tried for an internal transfer 12 times and was always denied. By whom? Manager Richards and Mr. Whitmore, the operations director. Coleman jotted down the names without flinching. Whitmore, curiously, constantly complains about a shortage of multilingual staff for our international clients, he said, his eyes narrowing, especially at Asian conferences. What Coleman didn't say was that he'd noticed a disturbing pattern. 3 months earlier, he'd hired a consulting firm to secretly investigate why his East Coast hotels had alarming turnover rates among qualified non-white employees. Zoe, I'll be blunt. Tomorrow, we have a trade conference with Dutch and Chinese executives. I need someone fluent in both languages who understands cultural nuances. And you want me to clean their rooms? Zoe asked, unable to hide her sarcasm. Coleman gave a short smile. I want you to be our interim international relations coordinator for this event. Salary, $5,000 a week, starting today. Zoe nearly dropped her purse. That was more than she'd earned in 3 months. Why me? There are hundreds of qualified candidates. Because I heard you speak Dutch like a native. Because you have the qualifications I need. And because I suspect something is deeply wrong in my company. An hour later, Zoe stepped into the elevator with a new badge and full access to the hotel's systems. On her way to HR to finalize paperwork, she ran into Manager Richards. The shock on the woman's face was priceless. Johnson, what are you doing on this floor without a uniform? Ms. Richards, I'm the International Relations Coordinator by direct request of Mr. Coleman. Richards paled visibly. Impossible. You don't have the qualifications for Georgetown. Fluent in 6 languages, including Mandarin and Dutch, Zoe cut in, keeping her tone professional. My resume has been in the hotel's files for 6 years, along with my 12 transfer requests. As the manager stammered excuses, Zoe walked on. In HR, she found an unexpected ally, Zoe Williams, a recently hired recruitment analyst who showed genuine enthusiasm. Zoe, finally, I saw your file when I started 3 months ago and couldn't understand why someone with your qualifications was in housekeeping, Williams admitted, arranging her transfer. I tried talking to Whitmore, but he shut me down. That day, preparing for the conference in the VIP room, Zoe noticed something alarming. The event documents contained incorrect and inappropriate Mandarin translations that could cause serious diplomatic issues with Chinese executives. She quickly fixed the errors, reworking the welcome materials. "How did you know they were wrong?" Coleman asked, silently watching her work from the doorway. "The previous translation used terms that could be deemed offensive in formal corporate Mandarin," Zoe explained. "Whoever did it knows the basics, but not the cultural nuances." Coleman nodded thoughtfully. "Whitmore assured me he hired the best translators. It cost a fortune." "He hired someone without checking their credentials," Zoe corrected, pointing out a critical error in the translation of a partnership proposal. The next day, the conference began. Zoe moved among international executives with natural elegance, switching effortlessly between Dutch and Mandarin, facilitating conversations and forging connections that usually took days. During a break, Whitmore, the operations director, who hadn't spoken to her in 6 years, approached her. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Johnson, I'm impressed. Richards clearly underestimated your potential." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. It's remarkable how my resume listing fluency in Mandarin was ignored, especially when the hotel spent $50,000 on subpar translation services for this conference." Whitmore's smile froze. "There must have been a misunderstanding." "I received confirmation receipts for every email over the last 6 years," Zoe calmly interrupted, "including those warning you about critical errors in translations for Asian events." What Zoe didn't mention was that Williams had given her access to translation contract records. The company belonged to Whitmore's niece, who had no verified expertise in formal Mandarin, but charged expert rates. Worse, all prior translations had similar errors that could have cost millions in lost business. On the third day, something unexpected happened. A Dutch businessman recognized Zoe. "Wait, aren't you the student who wrote that brilliant paper on linguistic variations in international business published in the Journal of Applied Linguistics?" Zoe confirmed, surprised to be recognized. "I cited your work at 2 conferences," the man exclaimed, calling colleagues over to meet her. Coleman watched from afar, noting Whitmore's growing discomfort. What the director didn't realize was that while he smiled and schmoozed, Zoe was weaving a web that would expose not just individual errors, but a system of entrenched discrimination and corruption that suppressed talents like hers while funneling overpriced contracts to unqualified insiders. No one at the Grand Horizon Hotel realized that the black housekeeper, who answered a call in Dutch, wasn't there by chance. Behind this seemingly simple transfer to another department, a plan was unfolding that would not only transform Zoe's life, but expose a system of discrimination affecting dozens of employees. The question wasn't whether she could prove what happened, but how devastating the truth would be when it came to light. On the morning of the 4th day, the Grand Horizon Hotel buzzed with energy. Zoe's initiative had generated preliminary contracts exceeding all expectations. Passing through the lobby, she noticed something troubling. Whitmore was escorting a young woman, visibly nervous, to the executive elevators. "Miss Whitmore, your Mandarin translation is perfectly adequate," he said in a hushed tone. "No need to worry." Zoe recognized the name instantly. The young woman carried a folder labeled "Final Translation, Main Contract." A quick glance as she passed confirmed her suspicions. The same critical errors persisted. "Mr. Coleman needs to see this," Zoe thought, hurrying to the CEO's office. Coleman was reviewing documents when she entered unannounced. "Zoe, what's going on?" "Whitmore is substituting my correct translations with flawed versions by his niece," Zoe explained, showing him screenshots on her phone. And I have proof this has been happening for years. Coleman stood abruptly. You're absolutely certain? I have it all documented. Plus, I found records of overpriced payments to her translation company, triple the market rate, while qualified candidates like me were systematically rejected. As they spoke, Williams from HR burst in. Mr. Coleman, sorry to interrupt, but I found something you need to see now, she said, handing him a folder. Hiring records for the last 5 years show a consistent pattern of rejecting qualified non-white candidates, especially women. Coleman flipped through the documents, his face hardening with each page. The external investigation found something, but this is systematic. At that moment, Whitmore walked in without knocking, interrupting. Richard, the Dutch are ready to sign, but they're asking about some translation discrepancies. Johnson must have messed something up. The silence that followed was icy. Coleman slowly walked to the door and closed it. Thomas, I see payment records for $50,000 for incompetent translations, while we have qualified employees cleaning bathrooms, Coleman said, his voice dangerously calm. Any explanations? Whitmore paled visibly. I don't know what you're talking about. We hire the best. Your niece, who has a fake certificate, Zoe cut in, placing a printed email on the desk. I just confirmed with Peking University that they never certified Ashley Whitmore. Whitmore shot Zoe a venomous look. You're nobody, a housekeeper who thinks she can play with the big boys. PhD candidate in applied linguistics from Georgetown, Zoe calmly corrected, with 6 international publications, all in HR's files, which you consistently ignored. Coleman stepped in. I'm calling an emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. By then, I want your resignation on my desk. You can't be serious, Whitmore laughed nervously. Because of this. Choose your next words carefully, Coleman warned. 2 hours later, the executive boardroom was packed. All managers, supervisors, and directors had been urgently summoned. In the front row, Dutch and Chinese business executives waited curiously. Richards, the housekeeping manager, looked bewildered, sitting beside other department heads. Coleman took the stage, Zoe beside him. Today, we uncovered a systematic scheme of discrimination and nepotism that has cost this company millions, he announced gravely. For years, managers like Thomas Whitmore and Sarah Richards enforced an informal policy that harmed not only our employees, but our bottom line. Behind him, a presentation displayed comparison charts of employee qualifications versus positions, hiring and rejection stats by race and gender, and inflated contracts to managers' family-linked companies. Miss Johnson, whom some of you knew only as a housekeeper, saved our company from a diplomatic and financial disaster this week, Coleman continued, by correcting translations that would have cost millions due to contractual misunderstandings. An Asian businessman nodded in acknowledgement, some quietly applauding. As a result of this investigation, Thomas Whitmore has been terminated with cause, Coleman declared. Sarah Richards is suspended pending completion of an investigation into her involvement. Effective immediately, we're conducting a full audit of all hires and promotions over the last 5 years. Shocked silence filled the room. Richards, now pale, stared at the floor. And finally, Coleman added with a slight smile, I'm pleased to announce that Dr. Zoe Johnson is appointed our new Global Director of Internal Communications, overseeing all our multilingual operations. The room erupted in applause, some hesitant, many enthusiastic, especially the housekeepers in the back, clapping with tears in their eyes. As she left the stage, Zoe saw Whitmore being escorted out by security, his face twisted into a mask of impotent rage. Passing her, he muttered, "You won't last a month." Zoe simply smiled serenely. In her newly acquired blazer pocket was a recording device that had captured every threat and racist remark Whitmore had whispered over the past few days, desperately trying to cover his scheme. That night, in her new office overlooking the city, Zoe finally let herself cry, not tears of sadness, but of profound catharsis. 6 years of cleaning corridors while her potential was dismissed. 6 years of your resume must have been lost, and maybe you don't fit the culture. She picked up the phone and called her mother, who had sacrificed everything to pay for her education. "I did it, Mom," she said simply, her voice trembling. No one at the Grand Horizon Hotel could have predicted that day that the real transformation was just beginning. While some executives still reeled from the collapse of old privileges, others already saw the inevitable truth. True talent, once unleashed, not only corrects past injustices, but redefines the future entirely. Whitmore's fall and his discriminatory scheme were just the first chapter in a restructuring that would shake the foundations of not only this hotel, but the entire American hospitality industry. And it all started with a simple phone call in Dutch. 6 months after that fateful day when Zoe answered a call in Dutch in the Grand Horizon Hotel lobby, what began as a single act of personal justice had become a quiet revolution in the American hospitality industry. From Zoe's office on the 32nd floor, now overlooking all of Manhattan, a modest plaque on the oak door read, "Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President of Diversity and International Relations." Her salary was 6 figures monthly, not yearly, but the real power lay beyond the title or financial compensation. The restructuring committee was assembled and waiting. "Dr. Johnson," announced Zoe Williams, now her executive assistant and close friend. "All regional managers are on the conference call." Zoe nodded, taking a deep breath before entering the boardroom, where Richard Coleman and the board of directors awaited. It was the day of the final presentation for the Hidden Talent Program, Zoe's personal initiative to identify and promote qualified employees systematically overlooked across the hotel chain. "The pilot program's results have exceeded all expectations," Zoe began, presenting figures on the screen. "In just 6 months, we identified 147 employees with skills in languages, finance, management, and technology, working in roles far below their capabilities. 83% were Black, Latino, or other minorities." Coleman nodded approvingly. The program had been his first demand upon accepting her promotion, not just fixing her individual situation, but changing the entire system. Most impressively, Zoe continued, the financial impact. Translation outsourcing costs dropped 78%. International client satisfaction rose 42%. And our diversity ratings now lead the industry, all while providing real opportunities to people already on our payroll. Across the country, Sarah Richards watched the conference broadcast from a small hotel in California. After a thorough investigation, she'd escaped termination by accepting a demotion and transfer. Now she managed the laundry in a second-rate hotel, a daily humiliation for someone who once dismissed talent out of bias. The program's next expansion will include an internal mentorship system, Zoe explained. Each promoted talent commits to identifying and supporting other employees with potential. Thomas Whitmore wasn't at the conference. After his termination, no luxury hotel would hire him. Allegations of systematic discrimination and embezzlement had permanently tarnished his name in the industry. Rumors swirled that he now worked as a night manager at a roadside motel in Arizona. His niece, Ashley, had to repay all her inflated fees, attend a professional ethics program, and ironically was now studying Mandarin through a scholarship from the Coleman Inclusive Language Education Fund. In closing, Zoe said, addressing the camera broadcasting to all properties in the chain, "I want to share something personal." She paused, letting the silence fill the room. "When I was little, my mom worked as a maid in a hotel like this. She had a college degree but never landed a job in her field. She always told me, 'Zoe, no matter how they try to make you feel invisible, your worth doesn't depend on their recognition.'" Zoe took a deep breath, maintaining composure. "My mother passed away, believing some doors would never open for people like us. She didn't live to see this moment, to see her sacrifice was worth it." Across the room, several executives, many recently promoted through the program, discreetly wiped tears. A company's true strength isn't in how much it earns, but in the potential it unlocks. For decades, the hospitality industry, like many others, buried exceptional talent under service uniforms, assuming people of certain skin colors, accents, or backgrounds were only fit for invisible roles. Coleman stood applauding, followed by the entire room and hundreds of employees watching remotely. Later that day, Zoe received an envelope in her office. Inside was a postcard from Amsterdam and a letter from the University of Applied Linguistics offering her a visiting professor position. Professor Van Houten, who made that fateful Dutch call 6 months earlier, had followed her meteoric rise. Ironically, Zoe thought, staring out at the city, "I should thank Richards for punishing me that day. If she'd just given me a warning, I'd still be cleaning those same rooms, my diploma gathering dust." The next day, Zoe officially launched a scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, partly funded by her new salary. The first beneficiary was the daughter of her former housekeeping colleague, who dreamed of studying hotel management. What began as a phone call in Dutch had created a ripple that now spread far beyond this hotel, far beyond this industry. The message was clear. Talent is everywhere. What's lacking is opportunity and recognition. True justice isn't just in punishing those who discriminate, but in rebuilding entire systems so bias has nowhere to hide. Zoe's sweetest revenge wasn't watching her adversaries fall, but seeing hundreds like her finally rise. If this story moved you and made you reflect on how silent biases can suppress exceptional talent, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of people turning injustice into platforms for real change. In the end, Zoe's greatest lesson is that true greatness isn't just about overcoming barriers, but about keeping the doors open for everyone who comes after.